everybody, and welcome to Infinite Chronos. I'd like to first start off by wishing each and every one of you a joyous and prosperous 2025. I am your host, Eric, and I must start off by apologizing. I have been away for the last couple of weeks and not able to film. I have been out with COVID and now I'm making my recovery, so if I sound a little bit congested, there you have it. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's continue on. So when you think of watches and outdoors and adventure and camping and any types of outdoor activities and things like that, you probably think of watches like Hamilton or Timex, watches from Casio like the G-Shock and the ProTrek line. Even Seiko has watches for field and so forth. But what about Helm watches? Well, if you've never heard of Helm watches, let me give you a little bit of history about Helm. All right, so Helm watches was created in 2014 by Matt Cross. Now, Matt is an ardent adventurer and explorer himself, and he's also a watch collector with a keen interest in dive watches. But he was very disappointed and disillusioned by the availability and the affordability of these types of watches. So he himself set out to create a watch that would embody the spirit of adventure and exploration. A watch that you and I could take on our own adventures and in our exploration in all of our exploits. So the first watch that Helm released was in October of 2015, and it was called the Vanuatu. Now, since then, they have released 3 other models, including the one that we are looking at today, the Miyako. Now, all of Helm's watches are ISO dive certified, so they are considered professional dive instruments. Now, that is something that is not very common in this price point. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the Miyako. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with the specs of the watch, like we always do. So we have a case diameter of 40 millimeters and a case thickness of 14 millimeters. Our lug width is 22 millimeters and our lug-to-lug is 47. We have a double-domed sapphire crystal with colorless AR undercoating internally. The weight is 195 grams. You're running a Miyota 9015, and this guy is water resistant to 200 meters, but is ISO certified. So let's go ahead now and let's get into the watch just a little bit further. Okay, so the case is a combination of brushed and polished surfaces. The case itself just looks and feels very effortless and just very smooth. Like, I would almost call it like water, flowing over the back of a dolphin or a whale. I just really think it's just so nicely done. The case flows very easily into the lugs, which slope downward to allow the watch to hug your wrist and keep it secure. The lugs are drilled, which do allow for easier bracelet and strap changes. Now, as we follow along the case itself, we come to the crown. Now, it is a screw-down crown, and there are no crown guards to protect it, as you can see, but the crown sits just slightly recessed into the case, and at 7 millimeters, it is signed with the Helm logo. Now, the crown itself is flared at the end to allow for a better grip when, you're using it to set the time and so forth. Now, even though the crown is large, does not feel large or get in the way at all. So now we're going to move on a little bit further to the case back. Now, the case back, just like the rest of the watch, is all 316L stainless steel. Now, you will find, when you turn this watch over and you look at it, you will find this absolutely beautiful engraving, which beautifully displays the Helm logo. And you'll notice this really nice, beautiful wave pattern, which this is a nod to the Japanese culture and tradition known as wagara. Now, these wagara are typically used on textiles and ceramics and other everyday items. Now, these wagara are based on patterns that are found in nature. And I believe this particular Wagara is called a Sigaha. A Sigaha, I think I'm saying that right. And that literally translates to blue ocean waves. Now, you'll find this particular Wagara on maps, and it is typically meant to invoke a sense of power and tranquility, and it symbolizes peace and good fortune. This engraving just really pays the respect to its name of Miyako. And like I said, of course, with Miyako being an island. Now, as we come around to the outer edge of the case back, you can see that it is etched, but just very lightly, so it doesn't take away from the etching and the engraving at the center of the case itself. The etching that you see on the very edge of the watch will display the things such as water resistance, ISO certification, So again, not too heavy. You get the basics along the outer edge of the watch, so it does not take away from the actual engraving and so forth on the case back itself. So let's go ahead now and let's take a look at the dial and the bezel and the hands of this Miyako. Okay, so when we're looking at the dial, you might pick up on the influence of the dial. If you just look real closely at the dial just itself, you can pick up on the influence this Miyako has from the JLC Polaris. And parts of the watch and the bezel also give off a Blancpain 50 fathoms feel to me. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments below. The dial itself is not flat at all, but it is layered in such a way that it is not distracting, but very visually interesting and engaging. So let's start off in the dial. Let's start off over at the chapter ring. Now, the chapter ring here, you will find the minor indices or the markers. Now, there is a dot at each of the hour markings and then hashtags in between. These markers are not loomed, which does make the dial a little bit easier to read at night. Now, I like that these markers are placed on the chapter ring. This really does, to me, allow the watch dial, to feel uncluttered, and it feels a lot more roomy. Now, as we move in a little closer, now I guess I would call this the outer dial, you will see that the indices all here are applied, and they are very, very clear and large. You have the Arabics at the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9 o'clock position, while all the rest of the markers are this kind of a trapezoid or blunt-tipped pyramid-shaped configuration. Again, the spacing here is just really good, and it makes reading the watch at a glance so easy. Now, on my particular model, I have the date. The movement I got was the Miyota 9015, and that date is at the 4:30 position. Now, I will say this is one of the only drawbacks on this watch itself. The date is just nearly impossible to read, although it does not interfere with the look of the dial. Making it out is a bit of a chore, so that's the one drawback, I would say. The date wheel, however, is the same color as the dial of the watch, and the font that is used on the date wheel is in keeping with the rest of the dial face. Now, if I had to pick this particular watch over again, I completely would have ditched the date. Now, let's keep going. Lastly, on the dial, we come into the very innermost portion of the dial, and you will see that this repeats that Wagara pattern from the case back. It is beautifully done and is not distracting at all. Now, when you look at the dial directly, it is barely noticeable, but when you turn the dial face just so and the light hits it at the right angle, you have this beautiful wave pattern that's making itself visible to you. Now, continuing on, you have the Helm logo that is at the 12 o'clock position, and that is printed on, and it is also loomed, incidentally. And then at the 6 o'clock, you have the words diver 200 meters, of course, indicating that this is an ISO certified dive watch. And below that, you will see the name of the watch. So next, let's go ahead and look at the handset of the watch. All right, so now we have the hands, which are a tapered baton, and both the hour and the minute hand are very well proportioned to the dial of the watch and have plenty of lume. We now have an arrow-tipped second hand, and the arrow tip itself is lume filled, and at the very tip of that arrow you have a red syringe. And I will tell you, as the counterbalance on the second hand rounds up to the 12 o'clock position, it really purposely, in my opinion, frames the Helm logo as it passes over. It's really nice. Now, protecting all of this, we have a double dome sapphire crystal that has an internally applied colorless AR coating, and I have to say that it works pretty well. Now, lastly, we are coming to the bezel. Now, this is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and it has a domed sapphire insert. And the numbers and the indices on the bezel are lumed. Now, speaking of lume, you might be asking, how is the lume? Well, I can tell you without any reservation, the lume is pretty darn good. In my lume test, I used my Boderi Admiral and my Steel Dive 1970 for comparison. And after approximately 20 minutes, I can say that the Miyako held up really well, and it did seem to keep up with the Steel Dive and the Admiral, which both hold their lume quite well. Now, the test is meant to mimic approximately 5 hours in real time, and I will say that in my personal experience, that even at around 3 or 4 in the morning, the watch is super easy to read. Now, completing this, we're going to come to the heart of the watch, the movement. Now, this is a Miyota 9000 series. Now, this is considered a high beat movement, and looking at the second hand, you can see why. That is 8 ticks a second. This is a 4 hertz movement. It is a very smooth, very smooth sweep. It's 28,800 beats per hour. And its accuracy is rated at about -10 to +30 seconds a day, and it has a 42-hour power reserve. Okay, so winding up our look at the Miyako, I'm sorry, pardon the pun, my bad. We have the supplied bracelet and nylon strap. Now, the bracelet is an oyster style with solid links and screws. Now, the bracelet is a combination of both brushed and polished surfaces, and it starts at 22 millimeters at the lugs and tapers down to 20 millimeters at the clasp. The clasp is a solid stainless steel, and the fold over has an etched Helm logo. Now, there are 4 levels of micro adjust, but no on-the-fly adjustment, which I kind of feel was a missed opportunity, but it really does not impact the watch in any way. The bracelet does fit very snug at the lugs, and there is no play between the links, which does give the watch and the bracelet a very solid and secure feel. Now, when you purchase the watch, you are also provided with a nylon strap that you can pick out. Now, the watch will come shipped to you on the strap. The strap itself can be a little stiff at times, but it does feel very sturdy and secure. And the keepers on the strap are also brushed stainless steel, as are the buckle and tang. And the buckle has the Helm name etched inside. Now, as far as colorway and pricing goes, the Miyako comes in 2 different colorways. And you have a gray slate, which is the one I purchased here, and you have a navy blue. And both of these are priced at $375 US plus $35 for shipping. So the price is the same for both the date and the no date version. So it's either whatever you want to pick, the price is going to be the same. So let's go ahead and I'll wrap things up and I'll give you my final thoughts. All right, so overall, I really feel that the Miyako is just an awesome watch. It really is. Now, I will say if you want to pick up any of the watches from Helm, you do have to get on a waiting list. I waited for approximately a year to get my watch. And this is because they build watches in very small batches. This way they can pay a lot of attention to all of the details. Each of their watches is individually ISO certified. So if for some reason it doesn't pass the certification, well, they've lost that watch and they've got to go build another one. So there is a lot of attention to detail and a lot of attention to quality and just overall artistry. This is it is an absolutely beautiful watch. You have the nod to JLC, you have the nod to Blancpain, and well, let's not forget the recognition of its origin with Miyako, the island Miyako. You have the Wagara on the back with the waves, and then it's reflected in the dial up front. It is just such a beautiful watch. Now, I will totally admit, yes, there is a few drawbacks. There are no micro adjusts, and their date, well, the date, is nearly impossible to read. But those are minor things. I can look past those. So overall, I really think this is a great watch if you're looking to add something to your collection. Now, it is a little bit more on the more expensive side, but still, this is well under the $500 mark, and you're getting a fantastic watch. They include the warranty card, they include the ISO certification card. It is just great. You get the bracelet included, plus you get a strap included as well. It is fantastic. I just can't say enough good things about Helm watches in general. If you'd like to pick one of these up, I've left a link in the description below for you to go check out Helm and get on a waiting list. So let me know, what do you think about Helm watches? What do you think about the Miyako? What do you think in general about this? Do you think this is a good investment? And if you can think of other watches that you think might be better than the Helm watch or watches, let me know. Leave me a comment. Tell me all about it. I want to know what you are thinking. So please, while you are there, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm about 621. I'd really like to make it there, and I could really use your help doing that. So if you are still looking for other watches outside of Helm, maybe you don't feel like waiting a year for a watch, and I can totally understand that. I've left some other videos over here that you can check out as well. So thanks again for watching. Happy 2025 and a prosperous new year to everyone.